And I have got mine. Okay, so I'm going to pick a couple of these things to. I don't think we're going to get to all of these, but to deal with some fundamentals that are going to hold true for all of them. And I think I'm going to start one. There's one of Aaron's in here. I think that's the one I want to start with here. So it's a picture of the girl on the steps going up to the train. If you can open that up into Photoshop. And I made Aaron's file smaller. It was a really large file, so I crushed it down a little bit. So does anybody not have this file open? Okay. So taking a look at this, what do you guys think about the comp? Is it the right girl? I think it is. Again, the trick to this is you were given two options, two different figures that you can put into your real world composite. One of them was side lit, one of them was top lit. What is the scene that we are looking at right here? If you turn the girl off in this, what is the scene? Is this top lit or side lit? Strong side light. I would argue that this is top lit. There's a little bit more light coming in from this area over here, but not enough to make it feel like a directional light, which is what the girl in orange was about. So what do we think about scale here? No one seems to know what we think about the scale here. So these are the kind of tricks that I want to talk about that you need to figure out. Does anybody know the height of a step in the United States of America? It's standard. So you go out to Google. I need everybody to do this with me. Go out to your friendly browser and do height of step USA. And it'll say here that the height of a step is between 7 and 7 3/4 inches. That is the height of a step. They're defined, and the reason, OSHA's all over this shit, because if you actually do odd set of step sizings, people trip and fall on them, so you would never have this in a public space. It probably wouldn't even pass building inspection for your private house to actually have those offset. So now we have some idea of a true scale that exists in this picture. So go back to your Photoshop image. And so what I want to do is I want to figure out how many steps this girl should really be. That should be how tall this actually is. So I'm temporarily going to turn the girl off. I know she's on the step that starts with Kimball on it. So what I'm going to do right now is zoom into this. I'm going to go after the ruler tool, but before we go after the ruler tool, the rulers, does everybody have rulers showing on the sides of their image? If you do not, come up to the view menu and come down to rulers and make sure that there's a check mark in rulers, and then you'll have a ruler that goes along the top and one that goes along the left-hand side. Now, this can be in any set of increments that you want or units that you want, but we want these in pixels. And the reason I'm changing this here is that we'll also then change it for my ruler. So I'm going to hold down the control key and click on one of the rulers. You will get a drop-down menu, and you want to select pixels. So then we need to actually put defined lines about what we think is the bottom and the top of the Kimball step. So for me, what I do is I do it using guidelines. So I'm going to come up to the very top ruler. I'm going to click on the ruler, and I'm going to drag down a guideline and set it at the very base of the Kimball step. and then I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to go grab another one, and I'm going to set it up at what I think is the top line. So the top line is going to be probably right under the highlight that's sitting right over there. And if not, we're close enough. We're certainly within. We had that 7 to 7 3/4 inches, whatever. We should be good to go on this. So then you come over to the tool that looks like the eyedropper tool and click on it, and you will get a flyout menu, and you can come down and select the ruler tool. So again, look at my screen to see. Does it seem like Photoshop is making their text smaller and smaller, like with every iteration? It's going to get so fucking small sooner or later that it's going to be like, well, we're going to have to guess at it because I have no idea what that says, right? I mean, it's like, really? Okay, anyway, select the ruler tool. Then if you come over to your guidelines, you'll see you'll have a cross. If you click on a guideline, I'm going to click on the bottom one, it'll actually snap to that guideline, and then you can drag this line up. Now we want a perfectly straight line to go up, so you hold down the shift key while you're dragging, and the line, you won't be able to, what it'll do is it restricts it to 45 degree increments. So but it'll do the one going straight up, and then come up straight up to the very top and let it snap in place. So once we do that, you can then look over at your info palette and you will see that there are width and height measurements. Now the width is 0 because we didn't drag that line either left or right, so there is no width on the ruler measurement. But there's this minus 138. You don't necessarily have to have exactly 138, but you should be close. Is everybody sort of close to that 138? So what it's saying is that step is 138 pixels tall. Now, the reason that this is a negative is, and I always do this, don't ask me why, it's like how trees grow or something. I always start at the bottom of my image and drag up, so because I think that's how people like work. That gives you a negative measurement. If you click on the top, I'm going to just do it again. If you click on the top, it'll give you a brand new, it'll get rid of that ruler. You only can have one ruler at a time. Hold down the shift key so that you get a perfect one going down and let go. Then you'll have a positive value there. It doesn't matter, the negative value, it's just the number of pixels, that's all. The negative just indicates you went from the bottom up, a positive indicates the top down. So we've got 138 pixels. So I'm going to show you how we do the math for this. So let me get my tablet on. You can do this with me. For the people in this room who are math phobic, how many people in this room cannot do 2 times 2? Okay, you can all do that, right? Okay, how many people can do 16 divided by 4? Exactly, you can all do that. Then the math that I'm going to show you is nothing to worry about. So you don't need to do this. You could typically I would do this on a piece of scratch paper. So you can do this on a piece of scratch paper if you want to do it. I'm simply going to create a new file to do mine as a new file. Yeah, that'll be fine. Okay, so this is how we're going to work the math on this. So I'm going to double click the hand to get this guy big. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush so that you can see this. I'm going to make it small and hard. Oops, not giant, hard. And bring my flow all the way back up. And black is my foreground. Okay, so this is the way you do it. So I'm going to put down my 138. And I'm going to put equal signs here and a line under this. I'm going to do 2 fractions. And then on this other side, I'm going to put what that equals. It was 7 inches. So 7 inches is the height of that step, and it's also 138 pixels. Then I'm going to put in how tall I think the girl is. So typical model, 5'10 to 5'11. She's got heels on. I'm just going to do an even 6 foot because it's just simple to do the math. So I'm going to put in 72 inches and then X right here. And what I'm looking for is this will now, I want to know how many pixels tall the girl should actually be. So all that you do here is cross multiply and divide. So what I mean by that is that we do the cross multiply. I'm going to multiply this 138 times 72. I'm going to do that on my phone so that I don't get this any more confusing than it already is. So 138 times 72 equals 9,936, and then you divide that by the 7 that's on the other side. Divided by 7 equals 1,000. So what I did was 138 times 72. That equaled 9936. I then take 9936 and divide that by 7. So again, you cross multiply this and then you divide by the other number, and that will give you X. That'll give you this number right here, and that is, I'm going to just round this up, 1,420 pixels. So the girl should be 1,420 pixels based on the image that we are looking at right now and based on the stairs. So if we go back, again, hang on one second, let me write this down in a place because I'm going to lose this screen in just a second. Uh, 1420. Okay, so we're going to go back to I'm going to get rid of this image. I don't need this anymore. I've done the math. I don't need to save it. So I'm going to zip back out because I'm zoomed way in on this. I don't want, I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool because that'll allow you to move these pixel lines. I'm going to drag the top one out of my frame. So I'm just dragging it back up to the ruler to get rid of it. The bottom one is the one that I care about. This is the one I need to do my measurement from. I'm going to go back to the ruler. I'm going to zoom out even more, and I'm going to click on the ruler and drag up and hold down my shift key, and I'm looking for that readout. You can see the readout in my info palette. I'm just getting it up to 1,420 and let go. Then I'm going to grab a guideline from my ruler and bring it down and let it snap to the top of that ruler. That is how tall that girl should be. Does this make sense, everyone, what I just did? Don't worry, we're going to do this a couple of times. Then I'm going to go ahead and turn the girl back on. And you can see, close. She's probably 6'5" or 6'6", but still close. But again, those differences matter. Those things actually, you know, how you figure that part out. So the girl needs to be scaled down slightly, which is a simple thing to do. So I'm going to select the composite part here. I'm going to select her. Command T, this is the advantage of doing guidelines on this. Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. It's saying it's going to temporarily turn my smart filters off. I'm going to say okay to that. Then if you do not have the anchor point showing, you need to make sure that you got a check mark in the top of your options bar right next to anchor point so that it is showing. And then instead of doing a transform around the anchor point, because if I do the transform right now to make her smaller, her head is going to her head's going to drop down, but her feet are going to drop up. I don't want to do that. I just want to shrink her from the top down. So I grab the anchor point and I move it down to the control handle at the very bottom. And then if I click on the link between width and height to keep the ratio so I don't distort the girl, and then I'm simply going to come up to the corner of the transform dialog box and just push her down so that her head is as tall as the space between those two bars are. And then hit the check mark to say okay. So you think it's not a big change, but to go back to your Command Z, back and forth, whatever, this is a massive change in here. And from my perspective, looking at this, she fits this scene better. That's just me. If you want to get rid of these guidelines now, which we can do because you don't need them anymore, come up to the View menu, down to Guides, and we are going to Clear Guides. So to get rid of the ruler, you just need to pick any other tool. So if you hit the V key, you'll get the Move tool. So this is where I would begin with this. Now the next thing that I would do on this, and this is the tricky part of this, the part that you guys are, that you need to get into your thinking. So remember I've said here in the very beginning when we first started doing this composite work is that you want to have them being the same color, the same exposure, the same contrast, all of that stuff. You want all of that to be consistent. To then put that together, they will then fit. And then if you need to skew the entire composite darker or lighter or less saturated or whatever it is, colorized or whatever you split toned, whatever you want to do to it, you put the comp together first. But the goal in putting it together first is to have everything as close to normal as you can get. So you've got the girl. She came in color balance. She was using a color checker. Again, I wasn't changing exposure on that, but her color was actually neutral in this. So what I'm getting at finally here is that most of you do not consider reworking the background, and you need to get the background before you start changing the color of the girl to match it. You want to get as close as you can get in the beginning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to the background at the bottom. It is a smart object. I don't know if it's a smart object that's based on raw data or if it's a smart object that's based on just an embedded, Aaron took a file and put it into a smart object container to protect it. But if you double click on it, you'll find out. So I double click on it and it opens up. Now this is saying he did this in a newer version. It makes this big threat. I'm in one of the latest versions of the beta. Aaron is obviously on the cutting edge beta because he's a beta tester for Adobe. But nonetheless, I'm going to just go ahead and say okay to that because I don't think it's really going to change things a whole lot. So one of the things that drives me a little nuts is that nobody bothers to leverage the tools that are in Camera Raw to figure some of this stuff out. So the first tool that I'm going to actually do is the color white balance tool because I don't believe this image is white balanced. So I'm going to click on the little white balance eyedropper tool. I'm going to come over. Now there are conflicting colors that we have in here to white balance on. Some people would say, oh, well, you can just white balance on the stairs. I'm not entirely certain if those stairs are white. Or gray, neutral gray, that's what it really is. Now this is a bug that happens, or at least it's for me in Camera Raw. I have to repeatedly click on that white balance tool after I've used the zoom tool to get back to it. But I'm going to actually try the Cottage Grove white balance thing. So you'll see I could try the sign that's up on the side, but the problem with the sign that's up on the side is that that's got some light that's coming in from the side. That is not necessarily the light that's hitting the front of the girl. I don't know that I can trust that this is that the railings in there are a neutral gray, but I have a pretty fair shot that the Cottage Grove sign is basically just a white background or a neutral gray background. It's a dingy or white. So I'm going to click on that to just see what happens, and you see it pumps an enormous amount of red into this image. I need that red to color balance with the girl because this image has now been neutralized for color and the girl was too. So this will get me closer. Now, if Aaron prefers to have the whole image be skewed blue, that's fine. We can do that, but you have to do that. That's color grading that happens after the composite, not at this stage of the game right now. The other thing that nobody is really doing in here is checking the exposure. What does Adobe really think you should be doing with this image? Come up to the auto button that is right underneath the histogram and click on it, and you will see, oh, Photoshop thinks that this should be a little bit brighter. Again, this is closer to the kind of exposure that the girl had starting out with. So this is the place that I need to go to with this. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay on that. And then you'll see that the girl now is way out of whack in line in terms of space here. So that would actually be the tools that Aaron has actually now used on this girl. So we're going to go up and take a quick look at them. I'm going to throw away all of the color balancing layers that are sitting on top, and we're simply going to do them one at a time. So if you go up to where the girl is, there's 3 of them that are above. There's the first one that I'm going to click on right here is actually his luminosity layer. He's opening up the coat here. That's one. The next one, if I click on the next one, is a hue saturation. So he's actually changing the hue saturation of that. And then the final last one up is he's balancing the color of this. I'm going to throw all of those away. So just select all 3 of them, hit the delete key, they're gone. Do not throw away the check layers. Those are the ones that are right above all of this. So you'll see, it looks like I've thrown away. I'm gonna throw away all the check layers as well because I've just inadvertently thrown one of them away. So grab all the check layers. Everything that's above the girl, throw away. And then I'm gonna run check layers on this. Oh fuck. Working in the latest, greatest version of Photoshop, I don't have my check layer actions in here. I also don't have my check layer action palette. So give me 1 second to fix that. And then I'm going to run check layers. And the girl goes nuclear. That's okay because the check layer, color check layer on the very top is turned on. So I'm going to turn that guy off. And I'm going to go down and turn on my luminosity check layer. And this is basically where I'm going to start with this. So again, it turns the girl black and white. And right now, she seems to be fitting the space pretty well for me. I think that Aaron had the right call. I think that some of the shadow part, that's the deeper, darker part of the shadow in her coat, needs to be opened up slightly. But from a black and white perspective, when you look at the perspective, poor choice of words, from a black and white point of view, this doesn't look that off to me from a coloring point of view. Her skin might be a little bit too light here, so I might want to bring that down a little bit. So we'll find out right now. But at any rate, I don't know that I'm going to spend an inordinate amount of time doing this, but I'm going to balance this out a little bit better. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on the girl, because I need to then put a layer on top of her to control this luminosity. So to do that, I'm going to then I've clicked on the girl, I'm going to click on add an adjustment layer, I'm going to add a curve. I'm going to immediately change the blending mode of that curve from normal down to luminosity. I don't want to impact the color of this. And if I don't restrict that blending mode to luminosity, then when I actually make something darker or lighter, it's also going to change the color and the saturation. Luminosity blending mode restricts that. I'm going to clip this layer now to the girl. Hover your cursor between the curve itself and the figure. Hold down your Option key and you will get that little square with the arrow that points down. Click, and this is now clipped to the girl. So then if you come over to the highlight in the properties panel and you move this way down, you'll see this is only impacting the girl. This is not impacting the entire image, which is what we're looking for. So I'm actually going to push this down just to bring that down a little bit on her face. That's the only part that I'm feeling a struggle with. Now when I do that, I'm bringing down all the tonal range of all of this, the whole curve. I don't have any points in the middle. I'm going to click on the one in the middle and lift it back up, because if anything, I don't want to block up these shadows any more than they're already blocked up. So this is the first move that I would make here. And if you turn your curve on and off, you can see I'm just bringing down a little bit of tone in her face. That's all I'm really doing in this. I've also got a problem with this. I'm going to change something on the girl right now. She looks like her left foot is floating in the air. So I'm going to select I'm going to select the girl again right now. I'm going to hit the Command T key to transform her. I'm going to leave the anchor point right in the middle. I'm going to zoom in onto her foot down here a little bit, and I'm going to rotate her around this so that she actually looks like she's more standing level on the ground. Now I've come off of Aaron's original shadows, but that's okay. His shadows aren't the best in the world anyway, so I'm going to change those as well. I'm going to click the OK check mark to actually do that part. And then finally, I am going to do one more curve on top of the girl to open up the area that's on her jacket. The really dark tones in here, they're too dark. So I'm going to go up to the curve that I put on to darken her face slightly. I'm going to add another curve, so I'm going to click on that. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to change its blending mode from normal down to luminosity. I'm going to hover between the curve I just added and the one that's controlling her face. Hold down my Option key, click to actually drop that down as well. And then I'm going to simply lift this. So I'm going to grab the shadow point in my properties panel, and I'm just going to drag it straight up. And I'm overdoing it, but that's okay because I'm going to control this lightly as I come back in. So don't worry about overdoing it. I've made her very gray. Don't worry about that part. We're going to invert the layer mask now. So make sure you click on the layer mask of this new curve. Command I will invert it and make it black. Then I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. I'm going to make it an extremely soft brush. So drag our hardness all the way down. A normal blending mode for the brush, 100% opacity, and take your flow down to 1%. White is my foreground color. I'm going to work with my tablet now, and I'm just going to make my brush a little bit bigger. And I'm going to just start scrubbing in this area where all of that dark shadow is. Again, at this 1%, it's taking me a little longer. I'm getting there, but it's taking me a little longer than I maybe want to take to get there. So I'm going to pop this up to realize that if you go from a 1% to 2%, you double how quickly that goes. I'm at 4% right now. This may take off on me too quick. But no, this looks good. And then I'm just restricting myself to the shadow areas here. And I just continue to run around here and to open stuff up. Make sure that you get her crotch area. That needs to be opened up. The stuff that's under her arms, that all needs to be opened up. The stuff where the coat is throwing a shadow on her leg, that needs to be opened up. I do not want to open up her legs. I actually think her legs are problematic here. But this is looking better for me right now. So I'm going to zip back out just a little bit, and I'm going to turn my luminosity check layer off. Now, you can see I've got color is a huge issue in here right now, so ignore the color part of it. But if you turn off both of these layers, the curve layers here, you can actually see that what we're doing here is, yeah, that's actually looking pretty good for me. Is this working for you guys so far? Okay. The next thing I want to go after is going to be the thing that's really bugging me about this right now is the saturation in this. So that's the next one I'm going to go after before I even do color. I'm going to click on the saturation check layer, and you can see in this that what the saturation check layer does is that anything that is highly saturated is lighter, anything that is not as saturated is darker. This has got nothing to do with tone. So you can see there's some sign that's right behind her that's extremely light. If you turn off the check layer, whatever that thing is, it's highly saturated. That red is highly saturated, so that's why it's showing up so light in this saturation map. So at any rate, I'm going to go ahead and fix this part right now. He's got a couple of control point of color readout points on here. They're just going to confuse me. So really quickly, I'm going to get rid of them by selecting the eyedropper tool. The eyedropper tool. Next to the ruler tool, the color sampler tool is what I'm really looking for, and I'm going to hit clear all to get rid of those guys. And now with my saturation check layer on, I'm going to add a hue saturation check layer above the last curve that is clipped, so the curve that's actually opening up those shadows. Select that, and then we are going to add a hue saturation curve on top of this. Immediately change its blending mode from normal down to hue saturation. Or just saturation, sorry, not hue saturation, saturation. Hover between the curve and the hue saturation adjustment layer. Hold down your option key to click and clip that as well. And then I'm just going to grab the saturation slider that's up in the properties panel, and I'm going to just start to drag it down. I'm just trying to pull down the saturation on her face so that it seems to fit this scene a little bit more. I'm going to then turn off my saturation check layer and then see, do I feel better about this? So I do. If I take a look now and turn that hue saturation on and off, you can see she's fitting the scene considerably better in here. And then finally, I'm going to go all the way to the very top, and I'm going to turn on the two check layers that represent color. So again, it's one that is just, this is the bottom layer that's got the, looks like the gray field of it. That is actually the color in the image, but I've got a hue saturation thing above it that's cranked all the way up in order to really exaggerate these colors so that I can see what the difference is. So you can see she's surrounded by this field of orange. Now I do have some blues that are on the sides over here, but that's not what's dominating my image, and that's why she doesn't seem to be fitting this image from a color point of view. Her face is fine, but it's her outfit that I'm struggling with. So to fix that, I'm going to come back down to the hue saturation layer that I just added to drop the saturation of her skin. Select that. Again, all of these layers that I'm using to control her, they all have to be stacked right on top of one another because they're all being clipped down to the girl. If you do a break in there, you no longer can clip something to the girl. So if I were to put in some other weird layer in between all of this and then try to do a clipping layer above it, it would not clip to the girl. It would clip to the top layer, the weird layer that I actually put in there. So I am going to then change the color of this. To do that, we're going to add, so again, I've got the hue saturation that is controlling the saturation of her skin. I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to add a color balance to this. Again, I'm going to change the blending mode from normal down to color now because I only want to impact the color. I don't want to impact the tone. And then finally, I'm going to clip this to the girl, to the whole group that's being clipped to the girl. Option key, clip. It's now actually done. So you can see I've got a dominance of blue in here. If you look up at your properties panel, there is a blue-yellow slider. You want to grab the blue and actually start to drag it towards the yellow. You'll see that she keeps going green, and at a certain point, I don't get any more traction. No matter how hard I hit the yellow, I don't get any better of that. So I'm only going to take this down to the point that it starts to get to that sort of blue-green area. I'm going to stop right there, and then I've got to try my other two. I don't think this is a magenta move, but we can see right now, again, I've got a dominance of green. If you grab the magenta green slider and start to push that over to the right, that actually, a small amount of that actually might just be part of it, not much of it. Jesus, this is so hard to do. It's really hard to do these sliders with a tablet, I think. So I'm going to do a -4 on that. And then finally, I'm going to go to my cyan red slider, and I'm going to push this towards the red. But that's not going to help me at all. Yeah, so if you want the same color in this that I've got, I had a -10 for the yellow and a -4 for the magenta, and that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to turn off my color check layers and see what I think about the color now. So again, it's my top layer. I'm going to turn this color on and off, and you can see it actually takes some of the brown that's around the stairs and sort of blends that into her. So this part seems to be working pretty well for me. I'm going to double click on my hand and kick back out, and I feel good about this. Again, I don't like the shadows. I think those are wrong, so I'm going to fix those really quickly. Come down, you'll see he's got 2 layers for shadows 1 and 2. I'm going to get rid of both of those. And then I'm going to click on his base layer, and I'm going to add my own new blank layer and call it Shadow 1. And zoom into this foot over here. We need to start with what they call contact shadows. In these situations, you'll know this if you ever look at any pictures, you can go out on the street and you'll actually see this happen with your own shoes. If you're standing on the sidewalk, there will be a shadow underneath, a really small shadow underneath your shoe that's incredibly dark and incredibly sharp. That's called a contact shadow. Then once you get away from that, like if you look at the area that's underneath her heel, because she's got a high heel on, that's actually not in contact, the area of shadow there will be softer and considerably lighter. So those are the shadows that we actually need to work with in the beginning. So I'm going to start on my shadow number 1. I'm going to hit the G key to get the gradient tool. I'm going to then come up to my gradient panel at the top and make sure that you are using classic gradient, not the gradient tool, not the new one. Click on then the type of gradient icon that's right next to that. If you click on that drop-down menu, you can open up the basics. And when you open up basic gradients, you want to pick the one in the middle, which is foreground color to transparent. And then finally, the type of gradient that we want is a circular gradient. Of the 5 icons that are running along the top, you want to pick the second icon from the left, a radial gradient. So this, make sure that black is your foreground color. If it's not, hit the D key to default your colors to black and white. If black is the background color, hit the X key to make it the foreground color. And then I'm simply going to come over here next to her. I'm going to start with her left foot. I'm going to click and drag out. That gives me a gradient here. I'm going to then compress this. So Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. Hold down the Option key to click on the top control handle, and we are going to crush this. I'm also going to slightly rotate it so that it matches the bottom of her foot. I'm going to come and bring this down. Now I need a sharper edge, darker thing. This contact shadow is not quite big enough for me, so I'm actually going to stretch it wider. Holding down the Option key, I'm going to click on the right control handle to make this actually wider so that I've got more area to actually work with as a contact shadow right under her shoe. I'm going to move this up into place, and this feels like a good contact shadow. It's actually giving me not a really bad secondary shadow because I'm in the really lighter part of her shoe that's in the back. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. But I've also got shadow that's in front of her foot right here, and I would never, ever, ever have that. So I'm going to hit the E key to get the eraser. I'm going to make it a little bit larger. In terms of this, you want to make sure that it is a brush, and I'm going to drop the flow down to 50%. And check on the edge of the brush. This is a 100% hard brush that's way too hard. I'm actually going to drag this all the way down and make it a soft brush. And then I'm simply going to come to this area in front of her foot, and I'm going to start to scrub that out to get rid of that shadow part right there. And I'm feeling pretty good about this. I'm going to make that brush even softer. It is softer. I'm going to drop my opacity of my flow down even more because I want to soften up this part in the back. This is kicking back a little too much in the back. So I'm going to make my brush larger, and I'm just going to swipe through this a couple times just to sort of bring that part back. Actually, I don't like the way that looks, so I'm going to undo that. Sorry, I was only meant to undo one of those. Yeah, so that's going to be all the shadow for that foot. I'm going to do the same thing now on the other side. To save time, I'm just going to do it right here in the same shadow layer. Typically, I would do this on the other. G key to get the gradient tool. Click and drag down. You've got a dot. Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. This is where we run into the problem. It now wants to transform the entire layer. I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to hit the circle at the top with a little slash running through it. I'm going to add another layer on top of this and call it Shadow 2. G key for the gradient tool. Oh, that didn't get rid of my original gradient. So hang on, let me go back to Shadow 1 because the gradient's still there. And L key to get the lasso tool, circle this and delete it. Back to the Shadow 2 key, Command D to deselect. G key to get the gradient tool, click and pull it out. Command T, hold down your Option key, click and drag this down to compress it really flat. Move this under the other foot. Again, I'm going to stretch this out a little bit wider and move it a little bit more in place. Go ahead and hit yes to that. Hit the E key right away, and you need to get rid of all of that stuff that's on the sides. That doesn't belong there. Double click on the hand, and this is where I would actually begin on all of this. So I'm feeling relatively good about this, except that I feel like that this is not a top-down. The light that's on her is not. Her feet and her legs are too light. There's light is coming from the top of everything down on her. So I have a sense of top-down, but I'm not feeling it here. I need to get her legs darker to actually match this scene. So I'm going to go back up to my whole layer stack. I'm going to click on the very top layer of what's clipped to just control her. I'm going to then add another curve to this. Change its blending mode to luminosity. Clip this to the girl. And then I'm going to grab the black point on my slider and I'm going to drag it forward, which will actually make her considerably darker. Once we get the mask on her right, we can come back in and adjust this. But this is, I'm just making it darker. If you want the same value that I've got, it's an input of 74. I need dark so that I can see what I'm actually doing. I am going to invert this mask now. Command I will change that so it hides what I just did with that curve. The B key to get a brush. And at this point, I'm going to go to my pasteboard because I need a gigantic brush. So hit the F key once. We're now on the pasteboard. Now I can actually make my brush much larger. And what I want to do is I want the center of my brush to be at her feet. That will give me the strongest amount of when I'm going to paint this with white. It'll be pure white in the very center of this, but if you use a completely soft brush, so zero hardness on this, as you start to go towards the edge of the brush, the amount of impact that this curve is going to have will lessen. So I'm a little bit high here. I'm going to do this so that it starts right sort of like about where her hands are. So again, center of your brush right there, right about where her hands are. White is your foreground color, and you put down make sure that your flow is all the way up. Opacity is all the way up, normal blending mode, and just make one dot. That's all you do. And you can see that this actually has now made her, it wasn't as extreme as we actually thought in all of this. So you can continue to adjust this if you feel like the need to make it darker. Come back up to your properties panel and push this in a little bit more to make it a little bit darker. And then you can turn this guy on and off and sort of see what it's actually doing. It's bringing her feet down. Now, in my case, I feel like that this actually should start higher up on her. So that's not a problem. I started it at her hands, which basically by the time I get to her hands, it's stopped. I'm actually going to lift this brush up so it starts really more right underneath her boobs. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. White is still my foreground color, and I can hit another dot on there, and it'll lift that color up a little bit higher. I still don't feel like it's up high enough, so I'm going to make my brush even larger, and then pop that again. And if I take a look at my brush right now, holding down the Option key and clicking on the brush, you'll see that it is way down here at the bottom. It is not on that figure at all, and I do not know why. Oh, wait a second, maybe I do know why. I'm working in beta and I've never changed my settings in this. So in cursors, this is set up to, no, it's actually set up right. So I would call that a problem. If I'm going to load this as a selection, and look what's happening. It's only painting right down here. That's not what I'm doing with my brush. Is this happening to anyone else?
That was the issue that I had before. Remember when I had asked you?
Yeah, this is not, that's not even close to what should be happening here. So at any rate, I'm not going to fix this part here. I'm going to finish what I think you should be doing about this image, and then I'm going to go out to Photoshop. I'm going to go back to a version of Photoshop that's not, but this is clearly a problem. I've actually tried to paint this, and it's nowhere near where I've actually hit this on her body. I mean, I can do it right now, Command D to deselect. I'm still working on this layer mask, and I can't even get the selection to stop. Oh, there it goes. I'm going to do just her right in the middle of this and hold this down, and it now looks like I've got, this may actually have pressure on. Hang on. I'm going to go back to my general brushes and click on the initial soft round that should not have any pressure on. This may be a brush that's actually working on the tablet. So I'm going to fill this layer mask with black. Black is my background color. Command delete will actually do that. And now, hopefully without a pressure sensitive brush. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. So there was a brush selected in here that was using size of the brush controlled by pressure of your tablet. And so when I was making that dot, I was not hitting it hard enough. So the brush was very, very, very small. You can now see the line of the brush. If I command click to load that, that's actually where I'd prefer to have that. So command D to deselect. And now if I click on the curve itself, I'm going to drop the effect down. So it's making everything too black. And so this is what I'm doing right now. And you can see it's dropping it down. It's giving a greater sense of a top light. The top of her face is now lighter. The background, I mean, as we work our way down, it's a little bit darker here. So then there's one last thing I'm going to do here. And again, this is the thing that you guys cannot forget about doing here, is that this is your image. This is the stuff that you're actually trying to, you're thinking about making this. This is your art. This is your work. So for me, if I was going to finish this off, I'm going to add one more curve on top of this, but I'm going to do it for the entire image. So I'm simply going to add a curve. I'm going to change the blending mode of this curve to multiply. This is a great trick. I'd use this on a lot of my images. It makes everything darker. Invert this layer mask. Command I. Get a brush, the B key. It should still be the B key. It should, son of a. The B key. Make sure it's a completely soft brush, much smaller brush. Not not that small. Yeah, about that. White is my foreground color. I'm going to drop my flow down to like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, to something like that in here. Working with white on this layer that's actually set to that multiply blending mode, I'm going to build in. I'm going to scrub in my own vignetting. That 10 is too small. I'm going to bring it up to 20. There we go. Why wouldn't you guys, you do this shit in the darkroom all the time, don't you? Why on earth wouldn't you vignette your image to create, again, images that are lighter in the center and darker on the edges, have depth? If you want to flatten your image out, you do the exact opposite. You make the edges lighter and the center darker, and your image just flattens out. But look at what this does to this image, to the final version of this. So this would be my version of this image. I'm going to come up to the history panel and dock it along with actions. I'm going to do a snapshot of what this history looks like right here. It made it up here as snapshot number 1, and I'm going to go back to where Aaron started, and then I'm going to go back down to where I ended up. And I can't say necessarily that it's better, it's different. But does that make sense to you guys, where we went with all this? All right, I'm going to quit this version of Photoshop and do the rest of this in a more stable version. So every time I do this, what I end up seeing is that people only go so far and then they quit doing this work and they just watch. If that's what you're going to do, you might as well just leave and go home and watch the video, because you're going to go to sleep here. You should really be trying to do this work while we're doing it. And if something doesn't work, say, wait, that doesn't work. Stop, slow down. You're going too fast. Okay. New version of Photoshop, or actually old version of Photoshop that's more stable. We're going to do one more. We'll take a quick break and then come back. We're going to keep banging at this. So... the next one I want to do is the one that's right next to it. It's the one of Liz's. I take that back. I take it back. I don't want to do that one. The next one I want to do is the one of Juliana's. So the girl on the street. So if you can open that up in your Photoshop and double click on the hand. There's a lot of guidelines around here. I'm going to get rid of all the guys. She's actually given me the horizon line that I can see. It's right back where the street's meeting the sky in the background. So we know where it is if we need it. But they're, for me, these are distracting. You can hit Command H, which will hide them, but it'll also hide everything else like marching ants and color readout points and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to come up to the View menu, down to Guides, and clear the guides to get rid of them. So what can you guys tell me about this image? Where's the light coming from? In the background. Shoot. Yeah. Well, you went like that, and I said, oh. Sorry, I thought you were just raising your hand, right? Okay. But what's funny is that your right is different than mine. Yours is my left, right? So it's not over here for me. It's like, yeah, so... anyway, would you guys think that the light's coming from this side over here? Yes, so where's the light on the girl coming from? The other side. So we have a problem right off the bat, right? So the first thing we're going to do is flip the girl. So select the girl. She's also got a shadow underneath her. I'm going to leave that shadow where it is because the shadow is actually correct. The shadow is actually based on the light source being on the right side, coming in this direction. So we're going to leave that part. But at any rate, I'm going to flip the girl. To do that, select the girl, come up to the Edit menu, and come down to Transform, and then down to Flip horizontally, and it'll turn her the opposite direction. So this part's actually better for me right now. However, is this light in front of her or behind her? Well, look at the direction of the shadows on the ground. Wouldn't part of this, it's at least part of it's behind her. Part of it might be right on the side, but part of it's behind her. I don't have any backlight on this. I can't tell you how many of you guys turned in images with backlighting. So here, just to name a few, Ava's backlit. Make this smaller so you can see it. Isn't this a backlit image? Yeah. Oh, I don't have others in here. A couple of others. There's a bunch of them in here that were actually backlit. So at any rate, I just want to say, so we're going to fake it, but I got to be honest with you guys. This is one of the hardest things that there is to do in Photoshop. So there is a recipe for how to do this, and you need to save this recipe, because if you don't remember this and you need to try to recreate this from scratch, you're going to hate your life. And I only know this because this is taking me years to develop this method, and it works really well, and I've never seen anybody do it any other way that was better. So I just realized that if you look in our week number 10, where we started composites, again, these are the PDFs that you should be saving. So in our week number 10, I think this is where this is. Nope, sorry, it's not. 9 is where we started compositing. This backlight in Photoshop PDF, you want to follow the instructions on this verbatim. I'm actually going to, even though I created this thing, I can't remember it. So I actually print them out, and because I don't do this a lot, I usually don't shoot a lot of my composite stuff backlit. But I'm going to go through this step by step and show you guys how to do this. So first off, you need to get the girl oriented correctly. So that part's been done. So then I'm going to come back to Photoshop. So the first move is that above this girl, we are going to create a blank layer. So I'm going to simply make sure that the composite body number 1 is selected. We're going to then click on add a new layer on top of that. Now this new layer on top of it has been clipped to the girl, but I've got my control layers are all above that. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. I need to actually put this layer that I'm adding on the very top. So Julian's already done a really good job, I think, of balancing tone and color. All of that part is working for me really well in here. So this is not, I don't have an issue with that, but I don't want to put this solid color layer down because it's going to then interfere with these adjustment layers that are on this body. So, but I do want to clip it to this girl. So I'm going to go to the very top of the layer stack. So go up, she's actually got, there's a curve on the bottom followed by a color adjustment followed by hue saturation. So go to the hue saturation. It's right underneath the luminosity check layer that is turned off, and that's where you want to add this new blank layer. So I'm going to click on it to add simply a new blank layer, and then I am going to hit the D key to default my foreground and background colors to black and white, the X key to make white my foreground color, and I'm simply going to fill this with white. White is my foreground color. Option delete fills it. So now you can't see anything, and I just call this the most ultimate backlight in the world. It's so strong it just blew the girl out, and this is what you this is exactly what you print out and send it to your client and say, here you go, this is it. Give me my $2,000. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so we need to clip this to the figure. So again, hover over the area right between the layer and the layer we just added and the one that's right underneath it. Hold down your Option key and click to clip it, and you can still see now you've got a pure, just the girl in white. Does everybody have this? Okay, I need to load the selection of the girl. So I'm going to come back down to the composite body layer. You don't have to select the layer, just hover over the thumbnail, hold down the Command key and click, and it will load it as a selection, and you'll see you have marching ants that are going all over the girl right now. I'm going to come back up to my layer, select this white layer number 1. You can actually name it backlight if you want. I've got the marching ants on here. You now need to run a constriction on this. So if you come up to the select menu, look up at my screen if you don't know where I'm at, select menu, down to modify, over to contract. What I want to do is pull this selection in to be basically where I think the edge lighting would end. So I'm going to contract this, and I'm going to put in 30 pixels. Sure, why not? You'll never know how much it is until you actually do it. So I'm going to say okay to that. And it brings it way too in. If this was edge lighting on this girl, it would not be coming in anywhere near this far onto her body. So what I'm talking about is the outside of her body where the edge light would start and be the brightest. As you start to come in, that edge lighting starts to fade to the point that it's no longer hitting the front of her body. That's the distance that I'm looking for right here. This is too strong, so I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and instead I'm going to go right back to the same thing, up to the Select menu, down to Modify, down to Contract, and I'm going to put in 10 pixels this time and say OK. And that feels better to me. I actually may go so far as 15, but I feel pretty good about this. So everybody got this part on it. Then you're simply going to hit the Delete key. And now we've got what we would consider to be a really strong white outline around her. Wouldn't you agree, right? Looks horrible, right? Hit Command, don't worry, it gets better. Command D to deselect. So the reason I talk about not trying to reinvent this on your own, when I first started doing this, I actually built exactly this thing around it. Now we're going to blur this thing right now to create the soft edge that goes in. But if you just have an outline around her like this, what happens with a blur is it fades in both sides. So it'll not only fade as you're going into her body, but it also fades as you go to the background. And that's not what a backlight does. So I'm going to blur this image now. So up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur. And you need to blur this in a way that is a believable edge light for you. So I'm looking at mine. Mine's a 4 on here. I'm going to bump it up a little bit more. I'm going to take it to a 5 or a 6. That feels like a better, nicer edge light that's coming across her. It's awfully strong and it's all over her whole body. But this is actually, again, what I'm looking at here specifically is this shoulder area right here. Does that seem like a good, decent edge light? That 6 may be a little too much. I'm going to try a 5. Yeah, that 5 feels better to me. And I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. So now you've got this girl looking like a alien, E.T., something. Or angelic, she's surrounded. So anyway, we are now going to add a layer mask to this backlight image. So simply come down. I want to add a black layer mask, so I'm going to hold down the Option key to do it. Hold down the Option key, click on Add Layer Mask, and all of that edge lighting goes away. Now we are going to paint it back where it belongs, because it does not belong all over her entire body like we just looked at it. So I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush, make it a much smaller brush. Make sure that white is my foreground color, so I'm going to hit the X key to make that my foreground color. Make sure it's a completely soft brush. Mine is. Normal blending mode, 100% opacity, and 1% flow. We'll see. The flow, we may have to bump the flow up if we get impatient about this. So where's this edge light going to hit her? Well, it's not going to hit any of the left side of her body. It's going to be on the right side of her hair. So I'm just going to start scrubbing in on this area right in here. And you can see I've got a wicked delay going on. There will be a little bit on the top of her shoulder. There won't be any on the inside of her arm here, but there will definitely be on the outside of her arm right here. The outside of her arm is already pretty light, so you're not going to really pick up a lot of that. We will get a little bit on the top of this arm right in here. You will also get a little bit that's on the underside of her arm right here. Not as much that's on the top side, but you will get a little bit. You'll get a whole lot that's on this edge of her body right here. You will get a little bit that's also down on this part in here, so I'm going to pull all of that part in. A little bit more on the very top of her head as well. You will not get any, you will get the side of the skirt that's right here. You will not get anything that's underneath it. Part of her leg you won't get either because the light is actually being goboed off of the top of her thigh by the by her dress. So the edge light will start just above her knee probably and then work its way down. It'll also be on the side of her foot. Now, you can see that there's a shadow on the inside of her leg on the other side, so that's not going to have any edge light on it. So her leg is her left leg is goboing her right one. However, that stops happening right above her ankle. So right above her ankle, this is actually going to come back in slightly. And I'm going to double click the hand to kick back out. So this is now the edge light that we've actually put on her. Now, if you feel like that edge light is too strong, and I feel like it actually is a little bit too strong, simply drop the opacity of this down. So I'm going to grab the opacity of this layer and start to pull it down just a little bit. And then again, turn on and off, your preview on and off, and that's feeling a little bit better to me. So that's basically creating the edge light on her. But now the problem that I've got is I've got a really soft shadow. This is the last thing we're going to trick out on this. I've got a really soft shadow that's here, yet if you look at all the shadows that are on the road, they're all really strong and hard. So I need to duplicate that part. So this is what I was telling you guys before. I'm going to recreate the shadow for her on this ground here, but then I need to match it to the color of the shadows that are on the ground. So that's going to be the last thing that we ultimately do on this image. So to do that, I'm going to come down and you can see that there's one shadow right here. There's a second shadow. These are the contact shadows that are right underneath her. When I flipped her, she went off of those. So we will actually just move those in a second. And the shadow number 1, yeah, these are just the 2 contact shadows. So I'm going to get rid of shadow number 3. I'm going to go after shadow number 2. I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool. And I'm simply going to come over and move it back into place. And then I'm going to shadow number 1 and do the same thing. Although I don't think these contact shadows are strong enough, so I'm actually going to throw them both away. I'm going to click on, again, I'm on my background layer right now. I'm going to click on add a layer to this and call it shadow 1, S1. G key to get the gradient tool. Click and drag out. Ooh, Command D to deselect that. Command Z to undo that. This is set to classic gradient. My foreground is just set to black. I just want to make sure everything else is set. I'm zipping along here pretty quick. So black needs to be my foreground color. Hit the X key and then the G key to get the gradient tool. Click and drag out. Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. That does not look like a black. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that and then go back. Command Z, Command Z. Go back in history, click on my, just the D key to deform my foreground and background to black and white, drag out, Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. I don't see my transform handles at all because of this background, but they're there. Hold down the Option key, crush this, more, and then simply drag this under 1 foot. E key to get the eraser. I'll go ahead and hit the check mark to say OK to that. E key to get the eraser. Make it smaller. Get rid of this. And I'm going to leave the shadow that's between her feet because that would actually be one. Now this contact shadow is too low, so I'm going to hit the V key really quickly to get the move tool and then just use my arrow keys to tap that up. And then I'm just going to duplicate this layer because it should be the same for her other foot. Command J to duplicate it. The V key to get the move tool and just go straight over to the other one. I'm going to allow them to connect in the middle. E key to get the eraser tool and get rid of this one on the side. So that's how I'm going to build my contact shadows, and I'm happy with that part. That part's going to be fine, I think. They're still down, both of them now. They need to go higher. They're both too low. So you can select 2 layers at once. Hold down your Shift key and click on the second layer, and then the V key to get the move tool and move them both up. And that's much better. Contact shadows are a very subtle thing. But now I need to build the shadow of her that I'm actually going to use to match this background. So to do that, I'm going to make one more layer on top of this. This is going to be my shadow body. I'll call it shadow body. Then come up to the girl and you're going to load her as a selection. So hover over the thumbnail of the composite body 1, hold down the command key and click to load her as a selection, and then come back down to this layer that is the shadow body, and we need to fill that with black. Black is my foreground color. Option delete will fill that with black. Command D to deselect. Command D to deselect. If you turn the girl off, you can see right behind her is a black version of her. So we are now going to transform this to try to get it to match the sort of the shadow part that's happening, the real shadows, the natural shadows that are actually coming across here. So to do that, you want to go to the paste board on this one because we might have to do control handles that are actually outside of my image. So hit the F key once to get to the paste board. And then with this shadow body selected, I'm going to go ahead and make this a smart object so that if I screw up the transforming, I can go back and redo it. So make sure shadow body is selected, up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, and convert this to a smart object. And then Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. I'm going to, you guys good? I'll wait. Okay. Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. I'm going to grab the anchor point that's sitting right in the, well, right about where her top of her crotch would be. I'm going to drag it down and put it right between her feet. So at the point that's right down, the center point that's down at the bottom. Because again, I don't want to transform around the middle of it. That will bring her shadows out on both sides of her. I actually want to bring the shadow way down. So by doing that, I can now direct this shadow and I can pull it down so that it lines up roughly with where the shadows of this image are actually going. However, this is what I was talking about being able to do. I can hold down the space bar to temporarily get the hand. I can actually drag this whole thing out much further now because on the paste board, my control handles, I can still see them on the outside here. So you can click on the one that's in the middle and drag this shadow out. And I'm trying to literally distort this. So I'm trying to think now, I'm going to zip back out just a little bit to sort of get some sense. This light coming through here in this direction like that, do I believe this part? I feel like I've drugged this out a little too far, so I feel like the shadow part, the dress would actually be in closer. But one of the problems that we have is that this silhouette of her is what the silhouette would be if there was a light directly on the axis of the camera shooting right behind her. It would not be, again, if you think about here, this is not her shadow. What her shadow is, it's me full figure like this flat on. Her shadow would be the side of her. The light is coming here. It's this shadow right here. On the screen, it would be this, not that. So I need to fake that part. I'm going to, first off, not drag it so completely out. I'm going to push it back just a little bit, but then I'm going to crush it. I'm going to hold down my Option key and click on the top control handle now and push this in and try to create more what this shadow would actually be. I still don't believe this enough. The skirt is too wide on this. So I'm going to then change this to the transform tool. It's the warp tool for transform. It's the little icon that's at the very top that looks like a tennis net. That's what I'm going with. If you can't remember that's where that one is, it's also in the edit menu down to free transforms. To transform, it is the warp tool right here. That'll actually give you a handle on a set of handles that are on this that I cannot see for the life of me on this background. So I'm just going to click on part of this and try to push it in. And you can see you can collapse, you can warp the skirt. And so I'm going to collapse this part in considerably so that it's more like the way it would really be. Now, I've done a really weird thing with her legs. Don't worry about her legs. But the problem I've got now is that this shadow is not actually coming from her feet. So with just the transform tool, I'm going to actually move this entire shadow up so that it's looking like it's coming from her feet. And that's basically, I'm going to kick back out and say, do I believe this shadow part on her? Yeah, I mean, that's basically how I feel this should be. It's not lining up now any longer with the direction of the other shadows, so you still need to transform this slightly. I'm going to rotate it. So again, back up to the transform, rotate, and I'm just going to bring this back a little bit to try to get it along the same lines as I'm actually seeing right here. So this part's actually working out pretty well for me. Again, I've got to deal with this stuff that's between her, the separation between her legs, but I'll get to that in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. And then the final thing that I've actually got going on here is I need to fix that part that's between those legs. I can't do it on a smart object, so I'm going to have to rasterize this smart object right now. So up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, down to rasterize. And then I'm going to zoom into this area. This whole area that's between those two parts of her legs needs to go black. So the B key to get a brush, make sure it's a completely hard brush. 100% opacity, 100% flow. Black should be your foreground color. Make it a much smaller brush so that you don't paint outside those lines. And you just need to fill all of this in, because again, there would be no space there. It would be, her legs are together. It would be casting a solid shadow. Okay. The next and last thing, almost the last thing we need to do, is you can see that the shadows that are on the sides, they actually fade as you start going from the center of the shadows to both edges. We need that same thing to happen with this image right now. To do that, we need to blur it, but you don't use a normal blur to do this part. So to do this, come up to your filter menu, come down to the blur tool, and then you're going to come down to motion blur. Not Gaussian blur, not lens blur, motion blur. And the reason that you do that is motion blur gives your shadow, your blurring direction. So if you look at the little wheel that's sitting right here in this preview box, what the wheel is that what we want it to do is cross in the direction that we want the blur to go. So you can see, I want the blur, if you imagine a clock face over this girl's shadow right here, I would want the blur to go from like 11 o'clock down to 5 o'clock. So that's just this wheel right here. If you crank your distance up, overdo it, you'll see what I'm talking about. And then I'm going to click on this little wheel and I'm going to turn it so that it looks like it's going parallel or perpendicular to her legs. It's coming straight across here. Now you can really crank your distance up on this guy to get it to, it's just, I didn't need to crank the distance up. I actually needed to bring it down. And I'm trying to get this now to match the quality of the fall off of the real shadows that are there. So I'm going to drop it down a little bit more. And that feels about right to me. If you guys want the same values that I've got, it's a distance, it's an angle of -59 and a distance of 23. I'm going to zip back out before I say okay to this and just make sure I believe this part. Yeah, it sort of feels good enough. So I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. So the problem that I've got with this now is, hang on one second. I'm going to undo that shadow blur part, and I need to fix part of this shadow first. You can see it's right behind her feet. That would never be behind her feet. So I'm going to click on this shadow part right here, hit the E key to get the eraser tool, and get rid of this part that's right there, because that would never be there. And so would this part right in here also never be there. I need to go to a much harder eraser to do that. If you want straight lines with an eraser, hang on, with any brush. So right now I've got mine set to a completely hard brush. I just want to change the line that's going from here up to about where her shin is right here. So to do that, we are going to click one spot right here on her foot, bring up your cursor, move to the part where you want it to continue to, hold down your shift key and click a second time. And that should have run a line straight up there to do that, and it didn't, so I'm going to do it with a mask instead. Command Z to undo that eraser part on the side of her foot. I'm going to put a layer mask on this. And I'm going to do it with just a regular paintbrush. The B to get a paintbrush, make sure it's a completely hard brush. It is. Normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow. Black is going to be my foreground color because I want to hide this area on my layer mask, make the brush a little bit larger. My computer is really unhappy right now. So the same trick again, white is black needs to be my foreground color. So the X key, click once, go to the destination where you want it to end, hold down your shift key and click a second time and it'll trace that line. Now I've got too much curve in mine, so I'm gonna hit Command Z to undo it and just feather this off instead. Oops, sorry. And I'm going to do the same thing on the front side. Okay. So now this is the way I want this to actually be. I'm going to do a history snapshot of this really quickly because I need to remove some of the blur that's happening. So if I click on my snapshot for history snapshot, I get the dialog box. You're not going to get one on the version that you're using. Don't worry, it'll still work. We can just go up and we'll work with it. Go ahead and say okay to that. It's my pre-blur. Then I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to apply this layer mask because I want to get rid of those parts of black. So I'm just going to drag my layer mask down. And I'm going to apply it, even though I've told you never to do that. This is the one case you do it. And then I'm going to blur this thing. So again, up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to motion blur. We are dragging it across, so that part's going to stay the same. And I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. But now I want to remove, remember, as shadows are leaving the body, where it's leaving from here, the shadows are much sharper there than they are when they get way out to the other end. So that's why I made that history snapshot state of that. So I can go all the way back up to my history state. I'm going to click on the little box that's right next to snapshot 1. This is the third time we've done history states and painted with them, so you guys should know this by now. So that's my history snapshot state that I'm actually going to go with right here. And then working on the shadow body, you can do this using other tools. I'm actually going to do it, I think, if I'm lucky, I can do a history gradient. So I'm going to zip back out. If not, I'll just paint it by hand. So working on this, my history is set to being what the snapshot would look like at this stage of the game. Up to the edit menu, down with a fill, and there probably is not going to be a gradient stroke in here. Nope. I'm going to hit cancel out of that. I'm just going to go to my history brush. History brush, where are you? There you are. History brush, you can use a small flow with this. Again, I'm going to change my blending mode to normal. I'm going to drop my flow down. And what this is going to do is wherever I paint with this is going to sharpen things up. So watch what happens. I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger. As I start to work on this area that's right close to her feet, it takes off really quick on me, and I'm down with a flow of 6. So I'm going to hit Command-Z to undo that, but it's the right trick. So I'm going to drop it down to 1, and again, the lag on this is killing me, but I'm just going to start to brush this in on this area and let it catch up. So it's sharper by her feet, it's fading by the end. So I've done all of this work simply to build a mask for a curve. Can you believe that? So the final thing to get it to match, to get it to be the color that you want this to be, is we're going to create a curve for this. So I'm going to hold down, we're going to use this as my selection. Hold down my, hover over the shadow body, hold down the command key, click to load this as a selection. Anytime. Anytime. I should have marching ants on this. What do I have? Let me kill my browser really quick. Back to the body. Command D to deselect. Hold down the command key. Click on this to load it as a selection. Are you guys getting a selection by any chance? Little marching ants? Son of a bitch. All right, hang on one second. Command click, and I now have marching ants. And then once you get the marching ants, we're just going to create a curve. So add an adjustment curve onto this. And you'll see when you do that, it actually puts a mask on there in the shape of that body shadow that we just made. So now I need to actually put color points down. It looks like there's already 2 of them down. I'm just going to move them around. So if you click on the color sampler tool, we'll just do new ones. Click on the color sampler tool, go up to the menu at the very top and hit clear all. Then I'm going to do 1 point down in this meaty shadow that's down here. Actually, I'm going to do one that's right in the middle of the shadow that's right next to her. So there's a strong real shadow that's right next to the thing that we're trying to match. I'm going to click there to set down a color sampler point, and then I'm also going to drop one right on the black shadow itself. Once you do that, you can actually turn the shadow body off. You've still got the curve on there, but we've gotten rid of the shadow. We're just hiding it for the time being. And then you can see what happens if I come up to this curve now that's got the shadow on it, the mask on it, shadow mask on it, and click at the very top part and start to pull it down. You can see this is how real shadows are actually made. We are actually removing the highlights and leaving the black point down in here. So what I'm trying to do is I need these 2 sets of numbers that I have just put down to match. The problem is, though, that I've actually got this layer. Actually, that's not going to be a problem. No, it's not going to be a problem. Sorry, I lied. So if you take a look at the RGB values that are sitting on here, you can see that this point number 2, it's amazing. I cannot see any of these. This cannot just be this street that we are on. I mean, look at that is supposed to be a readout. Can you see any of that? I can't see any color on this at all. At any rate, I've got this shadow. I can't see my numbers down here at all either. So this shadow number 1, that's the one that I actually have down here. So that's this one right here, which is reading in the 60s. And then this is, okay, so I've actually got these flipped. So what I need is, see these numbers that are right here in the beginning, the 63, 77, 108, that's the real shadow that's right here. The numbers that I'm getting now on this other side, when I start to darken this down, is I've got a 120, a 114, and a 111. I need these numbers, the after numbers here, to match the before numbers here. So this 111 is the closest. I'm going to continue doing this down because this is pulling all 3 channels down. I'm going to bring it down till my blue channel right here is a 101. So this is now matching. Then I need to do the same thing for just the red channel and just the green channel. So I'm going to go into the red channel right now. I'm going to take the very top part and pull it down. And what I need is this 117 needs to match this 63. So I'm going to click on this and pull this down. And then finally, the magenta or the green one right here that's like a 111, it needs to be a 77. So I'm going to go to the green channel, again grab that top part and pull this down till it reads 77. And that's how you do matching shadows. So looking at this, I still feel like in many ways it still needs to be pulled out more than it is right now. So there's nothing to stop you from transforming the mask. So I'm going to again go to my pasteboard. I'm going to click on the mask layer and transform it, Command T. And I'm going to drag this further out and rotate it further down. Oh, sorry. Put your anchor point back at her feet, or you're going to be doing that work all over again. And then drag this out and rotate it down. And say okay. I still feel like this is a little too dark for me, so and this is just visual now, so I'm just going to drop the opacity of this back down a little bit more. But you'll see you're awfully close in this. So this would be where I would go at this with. And I do still have my edge light on there. All of that's on there. So I'm going to do a snapshot of this. Say okay. And actually, I think I've already saved this image that was already had that part built in it. So there's no way I can compare it to Juliana's original one, but that's basically where I would go with this guy. Questions about any of this? Is this beginning to sort of sink in, make sense somewhat? Okay, guys, I'm going to call this, I want to take a break. I want to come back to do one or two of these. I know this seems like it's really arduous, but there's no other way you're going to learn this stuff other than actually practicing it. So let's call it 5 till. If you could be back at us, we'll do I'm going to be generous. We'll do a whole 15-minute break. So be back at 10 after 4. Shoot.
It's not about this. It's
All right, that's fine.
the lighting rig for Thursday.
Yeah.
So I have this drawn up. I can show you some of the inspo. But my question was, what's a good way to rig the camera? Because it's going to be shot from up above.
Oh, he's lying down?
Yep. I can show you our inspo too if that helps get a vision.
No, you can pretty much tell there. So, is this a frame with a silk on it?
Yep.
So the easiest way, the way I've always done this, is that you put up 2 ladders and you run a board in between the rungs of the 2 ladders and you lay on it and shoot it.
Really? You don't like
But
not?
but the other way to do it is that and again, because you have automatic control from the camera,
Yep.
is to rig it to a boom.
That's what I was thinking I would have to do. And then through Capture One, like live view it and see how it looks.
Yeah.
But I like having the control. But I don't know what would be best for this since the model's laying down.
But again, if you want to be on the top of them, so what you do is if I'm going to try to draw this in perspective, so hang on 1 second.
Take your time.
Well, that's not at all in perspective. Anyway, this is what
I
you're.
think I'm seeing your
This
vision
is
in a
basically
sense,
what you
but-
do. So you can do this off of 2x4s. It's a little janky that way because they're loose. But if you have a board that's like this wide, so if this is one ladder here and this is another ladder here, the board actually goes between the rungs of the ladder.
Have you ever fell doing that?
Oh, sure.
Because I see myself falling for sure. Not that I wouldn't do it, but
Does that sort of make sense what's going
Yeah.
on? So it's in between those. And then you lay on this. The tricky part is that you've got to get your head and your camera off to one side.
right.
But you're also not going to be up there. I mean, you can use a wide angle lens for this because there is no background.
Well, they'll be on a background.
My point is that there's no distant background. You're not going to
Oh,
distort
yeah,
the background
no,
by
no, no.
using a wide angle lens.
No, it's pretty simple. Like there will be some props kind of around, and then I might add in post writing, but that's literally it. So yeah, that's good.
So anyway, you can get, so they actually have most of the pins that they have in those super clamps actually have a thread on one end of it that will go into the base of the camera.
Okay.
And then you use, so the camera will be pinned, and then you need to,
You said?
mhm.
Okay.
So it'll have a pin coming out of it,
Okay.
right? And so then with your boom has also got a pin.
Yep.
So you put a knuckle on one of them,
Okay.
and then attach the other part of the knuckle to the other one, so that you've actually got your camera connected to the boom.
Yep.
And then you can put it into live mode to sort of do your and autofocus, right? You need autofocus on. So the trick that I showed you, you can't use that back button. That can't be the only button. You got to go back to normal, otherwise it won't autofocus.
Okay.
And then use live view to just kind of rough it in, and then do your first exposure, and then you can actually direct them from what you're seeing happening in Capture One. You can say, move your left hand up higher. You can't change your framing,
Yep.
but why would you really want to?
No, I think that especially for what we're going for, that will stay completely the same.
But remember, if you use one of those decent booms, the big ones, there's the controls that are on the back of it actually allow you to, pan your camera side to side and up and down.
Never used one. That's the thing. I mean, I have an assistant helping
Oh, I
lighting
think
and
you're
stuff.
switching it.
And I know that they're
For
pretty
us, it was
knowledgeable
5
about
for,
all that, so I feel like what I lack, they'll
newer,
pick up the slack too. But yeah, I've just never used one. So I'm
when
like,
are you shooting this?
Thursday night
Mhm.
For the test, and then
from 6 to 10.
Yeah, it was
But
5,
I'm gonna
like,
get there at
Casper,
like
blue over
4:45
and then
to set
3 for
up.
silver.
Shoot me an email. If I can get over, I'll show you how to use it.
Okay.
I had to rig it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Cause like I feel like, yeah, the boom and the setup of the camera is the only thing that I'm like, how to do.
It's easy.
Yeah. Okay.
All
Well,
right.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I steal that?
Yeah.
Thanks. This app.
I feel like I should sign it.
Yeah, can I get your autograph?
I just wanted to. I have to leave early.
Go.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to let you know. Before
Oh, thanks. I should have actually paused this video, shouldn't I have?
That's probably a good idea.
But we're going to go through the best way to actually do this. So I'm not even going to bother with that part. If you can go back to the assignments for us, it is in week number 10. I want you to just start with a brand new version of this. It's just easier to take it from the top. So in version 10, in the assignment folder, inside the captures folder, there are 5 different swimsuits in here. I want you to select them all. So I'm just going to click on the top one, hold down the shift key, and click on the bottom one. There's XMP files in there as well. You don't need to worry about opening. If you select them, they don't open in anything, so you don't need to worry about that. So just drag all of those on top of your Photoshop icon. I have to drag on mine because if I just double click on these, it's going to open up in the wrong version of Photoshop. And it should open all of these up into Camera Raw, all 5 of them, which is where we want to start. This is actually a good thing. So our first move in this was to actually color balance everything. Sometimes when I've done this assignment, I go in and deliberately corrupt the color balancing and that. I did not do that with you guys. Thank you, Verser. You're welcome. So, but at any rate, I'm going to click on the white balance tool on the in the basic panel. Again, if you're using a different version of Photoshop now, you have a color. They've moved the color to the color panel, not to the basics panel. But anyway, just open up the color panel, find the white balance tool, the little eyedropper. You want to click on the gray patch that's right next to the red. That will actually do the white balance. That's the only thing we really need to do here. Then we need to sync that to all of the others. So come up to the thumbnail, click on the very top right-hand corner of the thumbnail. There's 3 little dots. If you click on that and come out, you'll get a flyout menu. Do a select all. That will select all of the other images that are in here as well. All we want to do is sync the white balance to the other images. That's why we had to do the selection part of it. So then back up to the thumbnail again, those same little 3 dots in the top right-hand corner, click on that flyout menu and come down and do sync settings. And now everyone will have, if you say okay to that, everyone will have the same white balance on them, which is what we want. So then if we come down to the one in the middle, the one that's frame number 59, this is the one we're trying to fix. So this is where I'm going to actually go after this part. What you could do in here, if you zoom in onto the highlights in on the suit and her body down here. Some of them are completely blown out. If you look at her bust point right here and get a readout, well, that's actually in the 22, so that's not totally blown out. I'm looking at some other stuff. If you wanted to bring more of this back in, you could actually use your highlight slider. So again, if you open up your basics panel, in the highlight slider, you can click and pull those even further down. You'll see it gives you a little bit more gutsy suit to work with. That's a preference. For me, I like to actually have that detail in here. That's just the way I would go. However, you need to now match this to everybody else, because the problem is that I'm going to use suit material from other images to fix this, but this is the only one that I've done that highlight recovery on. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to go to this thumbnail and click on the little 3 dots that are in the upper right-hand corner and do a select all. They're all selected now. And then again, back to those same little 3 dots and do a sync settings. And now what you need to make sure is that the basic panel is checked. because if you open this up, this is where the highlights actually are, that move we've made. So those are the only things that you need to make sure that you're doing, is that you're syncing the things that you're trying to, that you want to be common to everybody. So that's the beginning of the process for me right here. So then the next thing I would do, I don't need to open all of these. I don't need to open the image that has the color card in it. I'm going to select on the image that's between the two, and I'm looking at this image, and I'm looking basically at her belly here. What I'm looking for is swimsuits that are actually stretched out, that don't have as many wrinkles in it. The thing about this is that I'm also looking for areas that show enough of her crotch to match this one over here. This is the one that I'm trying to match. If you take a look at the swimsuit that's underneath the one I'm trying to fix, you'll see that her thigh comes up and it covers that whole area. So I might have a better swimsuit stomach right here, but I get into a nightmare about trying to marry this back up with the original one and fix that part. So then I'm going to go to the one that's at the very bottom as well. This is also missing the crotch, but this is probably the best one for her, the top half of her body. So I'm looking to have that part stretched out. So the three images that I'm going to open up is this one, which is number 66. I'm also going to hold down my command key now and click on the one in the middle, number 59. That's the one that I need. That's the base, the one I have to fix. And then finally, I'm going to click on number 53. That's the one that actually has enough of the stomach and her crotch still in there to actually, hopefully, pull this off. So those are the three images that I'm going to open up. I can open them up as smart objects. That part's fine. Now, I'm still on my pasteboard here, so that's why I can only see a single image. So I'm going to hit the F key once to go to the black pasteboard, F key again to get back to the stoplight parts. And now I've got my three images here that I'm actually going to use to build this, hopefully fix this suit with. So I've also got Juliana's image open still, so I'm going to close that. I don't need to close that part. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm actually going to make selections of the swimsuit itself, and I'm going to bring them in. So the first one I'm going to go after is frame number 53. It's the one that actually has her stomach, so sort of like from right under her boobs down to her crotch. That's a good enough suit for me right there. You can do a pretty rough selection about this. There's enough there's the swimsuit itself is probably pretty strongly separated from the rest of the image. So I'm just going to try the quick selection tool. So again, quick selection tool. I'm going to come over onto the image and simply click and drag it down. And it got all of the, drag it down in this other direction, go all the way down to the water. You can over select this. That part doesn't matter so much. You just don't want to under select this because you want the whole suit. We're going to use a layer mask to move it around anyway. So make my quick selection tool a little smaller and come up and get the whole part. You don't need the strap that's up on her shoulder, and you also don't need the reflection of her in the water. So I'm going to hold down the Option key and get rid of the reflection of the suit part that's in the water. I don't need that part. The rest of it, I've actually got, if you zoom in to the line that's underneath the hem, this is one that tripped up a lot of you guys. In my case, if you take a look at my marching ants, they run along the seam. You want to make sure that you have the entire seam in there. So I'm going to just bring this down to make sure I've got all of the suit that's in there as well. And I'm going to continue along this line. This first part becomes pretty important. So go ahead and take your time building this selection. Make sure that you've got all of the knobs that are around the suit fabric that's around that ring. Make sure that you've got the whole edge of the suit that's running along the inside of her thigh. I've got the shadow now, so I don't want the shadow. I'm going to hold down my Option key and click to get rid of the shadow part. And the backside looks good to me. That's all good. That's all good. That's all good. So all of this, the neckline, I don't see all of it. So yeah, that's pretty good. And that's pretty good. I got a little bit too much of the skin, so I'm going to knock that off. Okay, so this I feel like is a pretty good selection, and I'm going to jump that to its own layer, Command J. So I'm going to bring this over now. Again, you need to make sure that your swimsuit that you want to fix is visible. Then click on this new jump layer and click and drag it over on top of the center of the image that you want to fix this on. Hold down your shift key and it will bring it into the middle of your space, and that'll be the first part of the suit that we actually use to fix this image. I'm then going to get rid of the image that it came from. So frame number 53 is giving up its good, so I'm just going to get rid of it. I'm not going to save any work I've done on it. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the suit in the frame number 66 where she's bent and pulling way back. Same selection process. In this part, I'm less concerned about the lower part of her suit. It's really the upper part. So you don't need to worry about down by her stomach or anything else. You just need to make sure that all of the upper part actually is selected, because this is going to be what we use. And that part's pretty good. Make sure that you get down to the water. Make sure that you get the seam that's on that lower side of the suit. And again, I don't worry about really the rest of it because I'm not going to use that area down there. Command J to jump that to its own. Move this out of the way and drag that on top of the image of the one that we're trying to fix as well. Hold down the shift key and let go, and it brings in the second one. So I'm going to turn off this first one, the top one, the one that's actually for the top part. I'm also going to get rid of the image that I just stole the top from, and you don't need to save that. So I've got this image right here that's just for the lower part of the suit, and I want to actually map this thing to her. I'm going to turn both of these into a smart objects first, though, because we're going to transform this thing to fit it. But I want to make sure that when I transform it that I can go back in and modify it and don't progressively destroy my image doing this. So I'm going to select on this layer number 1. I'm going to come up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, and convert it to a smart object. I'm going to turn on that top layer and do the same thing, selected, and just go ahead and get this out of the way and make it a smart object as well. Then I'm going to turn off that top layer, and I'm going to select my bottom layer right here. And then I'm just going to roughly move this into place. The anchor point that I'm going to use is the steel ring that's on her hip. I've got a solid piece of the suit that's right there, so I'm going to just move that down so it's sitting right on that point. So I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, and I'm just going to drag it down so that it lines up roughly. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to be close enough. I'm going to zoom into that area to make sure that it is better here. So I can, with the V key selected, you can use your arrow keys then to actually move this guy into place. And I'm really just trying to get it to line up as close as I can get it to line up. So that's my first move in doing all of this. Then I'm going to drop the opacity of this back so that I can actually see the original suit that's underneath this. So I'm going to bring my opacity down to roughly 50% so that I can see both of these things. I'm going to zip back out, and now I'm going to actually use puppet warping to map this new suit to the old suit. So to do that, with that layer selected, up to the the edit menu, down to puppet warp. This will bring me into puppet warp. Your very first move, if you've got the computer that can do it. So maybe you should use the fewer points. And I'm just kidding. That was so mean. Sorry. I'm going to use more points. It gives you more more precision. If your computer can't handle this, because it's all about processor. That's what this is all about. If it can't handle it, then actually go back to normal. And if you really are struggling and that you're getting a horrible lag, whatever, go to fewer. But at any rate, while I'm here, I actually been doing some liquify work, and I turned off of my graphics card. I'm going to make sure that that card is still on, so I should be able to jump out of here and do this. I can't, so I can't get to my settings here. So really quickly, you guys can stay in Puppet Warp. I'm going to jump out really quickly to change my settings. Hopefully this will take care of some of my lag problems. So settings to performance, and I'd left it off. So I'm going to click Use Graphic Processor back on and say OK. And then I'll go into Puppet Warp. So up to the image edit menu, down to Puppet Warp. So with this selected, you do not need to see the mesh here. No, that's not a good sign. Yep, there's the mesh here. I'm going to change mine to more points. You do not need to have the mesh on to see it to do this work. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a point right on the middle of that loop that's going around the steel ring, because that was the one that I actually put the anchor point on. That's how I know I want that one to be fixed. And then I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. I'm going to reset this because it's the angle of this as well. I'm going to come up to the collar that's on the faded out version of this. So where the collar is going around the other steel ring, I'm going to drag that up and set it on the other steel ring up at the very top. So I'm going to move into this place to sort of see what that's like. Yeah, and you can continue to refine this to get that part in to be correct. Now, if other things are off, don't worry about that part right now. I'm just sort of doing the outside edges about this. So then I'm going to come down to the lower point here that's actually going into the water. You can click on this and sort of see what, you can move it out of the way to sort of see what's going on. I'm going to put an anchor point down there, and then I'm going to drag the rest of this down to put my other anchor point down here at the back. And then I'm going to come up and grab her boob that's on the top, the one that's on the very top part of the image. I don't know where this lands, so I'm going to just click on a point up here. This is not a good sign. Oh, not a bad sign. It was the wrong one I was clicking on. So I'm going to click on this to bring it out to actually fit the top. And I'm just roughing this in right now. I'm going to bring the neckline down so it begins to match. And I've roughed this part in. I'm going to go down and do the crotch area, and I'm just throwing in some quick points here. You've got to go in at a certain stage of the game and do this really, really, really tightly, which we're going to do right now. So I'm going to grab the crotch point here and drag this up and put it into place. I'm going to grab the far ring. I can't see the ring, but I can see the point that it's that loop that it's supposed to be on. And then I'm going to actually zoom in on this and start to work really close now. So I'm going to click this, and I'm going to add a whole bunch of points to get the seam of the new suit to match the seam of the old suit. And any sort of like scalloping that you get in there, you actually need to put another point in between. So this takes some serious time to do this. Again, every time you need to move, just hold down your space bar so that you can move. But what you're looking to have, you want the seam. Everybody look up at my screen right here. You can see this seam line right here. This is the new suit. I don't want to use the seam of the new suit. I want to use the seam of the old suit. So I'm going to drag this seam past the seam of the original suit. And the reason I want to do that, hang on, I didn't click on this. The reason I want to do that is that I just want the fabric that's in between. The original seam, there's nothing wrong with the original seam. That defines all the contours. It's just the fabric that's on the inside of those seams. So all of this new suit needs to have, its seams need to be on further out. They need to be on the edge so that when I use a layer mask to come in here and actually mask in, off this new suit that I'm distorting the hell out of, it's just the fabric, the material stays on the inside. And you just continue to work your way on up. And then once we get up, you don't need to worry too much about once you actually get up to her boobs that are at the very top, because we're using a completely different image to fix that area. But you want to go up high enough so that you don't all of a sudden end up with some weird small little gap between both of these new patches. You do not want that to happen. So I've got that part is dialed in pretty well. I'm not going to work on the neckline at all because, again, I'm going to use another image for that. But I am going to come back down to the whole crotch area and work on the thigh, the inside of that thigh that's on the outside. You've got to pull all of that part out. So we're not going to spend hours doing this because, well, it wouldn't take hours. But again, you think to yourself right now, oh my God, Versa, this is just taking so long. I can't believe that who would ever in their right mind do this. Well, everyone who actually tried to do this using some other method is who would do this. Because this, once you get it set into place, it's pretty flawless. So again, in this case, you want to make sure that your seams or that the fabric is going out at least as far as the seams go to cover that. You can even pull this out slightly onto her leg because again, we're going to use a layer mask to trim all of those parts off. So I'll work my way down on the bottom part a little bit more. And I'm going to stop down here at this part because, again, you guys will understand the whole sort of premise about how we go about doing this part. All right, I'm going to call it a day here, even though there's still... So I've got the whole lower part done. You can see the number of part. I'm not going to actually do the... Well, here, let's do the upper rim really quick. All right, I'm gonna stop here. Yeah, good enough. Okay, so then I'm gonna go ahead and click on the check mark to accept the puppet warp. I'm gonna crank my opacity all the way back up to 100% right now. And you can see it's really kind of bumpy line that's actually going down there. There's a lot of scalloping that's over in here. Hopefully I'm gonna get rid of that right now. So I'm gonna turn this layer off and I'm going to make a selection again of the suit. When I made the first selection, I should have saved it, although I haven't selected this suit. I only selected the suit in the other two. So back to the quick selection tool and just select this suit really quickly. We are going to, sorry, now when I made that selection, you can see how weird it gets. It's because I'm still on this layer, even though the eyeball is turned off. Command D to deselect that. Go back to the original image, the one that's on the bottom, that is the suit that you want to select. And again, just do a quick rough selection of this and zoom in. And I want to make sure that, again, I've got all of the seam part of this in here selected. So I think I do. So then we're going to turn on the puppet warp version of this. And I'm simply going to apply that selection as a layer mask. So this is now showing, again, I've pulled the whole part of this out. So I need to zoom this down to make this smaller. So you can see the edge that's wrong right here. I'm going to fix this edge right here. If you turn this off, you can see that the seam of the original suit is on the inside right here. That's basically more what I'm really looking for here. So I'm going to turn this back on, working on my layer mask. I'm going to hit the B key to get a brush. Black is my foreground color. I'm going to make this a relatively hard brush, so somewhere in the around 75-ish. 100% normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow. And then I'm going to come in and on this area, if you drop your opacity on this a little bit, you can actually see the line that you're trying to find. It's the original seam. And I'm just going to start to paint along this. I'm going to try this on a tablet really quick. Okay, now even my tablet has died. Okay. Back to my hand. So anyway, you can see the seam that's actually in here. That's what I want to mask out. That's what I want to hide on this new layer. I want the original edge, and it starts right along here. And then you want to make sure that you get the stitching of the original seam. So that's where I'm going with all of this. What just happened? Something just got completely moved. And I think it's my entire image. Let's try that again. All right, that part's working. We'll do the other edge over here. And the back edge. Anyway, so you guys get what's going on here basically, right? Everybody go with this. Bring your opacity all the way back up again. And this is now how we fixed the lower part of the suit. And you can see if you turn this on and off that it's changed. It's done the lion's share of this work. So we would do the same thing for the bust area on the top. We would remap that. And in this case, you can use warping to actually really shape, because the way she's got, if you take a look at this image that's beneath it, you can see that what's causing the problem is she's sinking her stomach in. And in the one where it's pulled all of that, she's pulling her stomach way back. Well, in one of them, her boobs are sort of collapsing in, and on the other one, it's like being pushed out. So you need to warp this so it actually matches the two of these. So I'll just show you a really quick down and dirty version of that part. I'm going to drop the opacity down here a little bit so I can see it. I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool. I'm going to bring her down slightly into this, and then I'm going to rotate this so that it actually is closer to the line of her stomach to begin with. So again, Command T to actually transform this, and I'm going to rotate this so that it's more the way her actually her chest would be in the original image. And again, if you can't get it close enough, you can always warp this. So click on the little tennis thing up at the very top, and you can actually pull parts of this out and push other parts of this in to just try to reshape this to the contours of the suit. You can also, once you get it roughed in, then go to Puppet Warp and actually dial this completely in. So I'd go ahead and say okay to that, and then go into Puppet Warp and do the same remapping thing that we just did. So, but in the meantime, while we've got this one done like this, so I've fixed most of this part, I'm going to actually split this. So this would you do frequency separation on the end here. And we're going to do this really quick because we've only got 5 minutes. But to do this, I'm actually going to make a merged stamped version of this. So I've got the second one, this one that I had on for her top. I'm not going to use that right now, so I've got it turned off. I've got the the Puppet Warped version that's now sitting at the top. Hold down the Command, Option, Shift, and hit the letter E. It will do a combined version of that. I'm going to double click on that and call this new version, NV. Make 2 copies of this, Command J, Command J. The first one, called NV copy, we are going to rename low. It's going to be the low layer for my split frequency. Double click on the NV copy 2, make that high. So those are my 2 layers that I'm going to do my split in. I'm going to select my low layer. I'm going to turn off the eyeball for the high layer, and then I'm going to zoom into this image and see what's going on in all of this image right here. Make sure I turn that opacity all the way back up again. Sorry. Oh. No, never mind. That's not the one I was worried about. Okay. Hang on. Yeah, no, I was worried that when I merged those two that the layer that I added for her stomach was at a lower opacity. It's not. Okay, so clicking on the low layer to make it active, the high layer is turned off. We're going to come up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur, and I'm going to crank this back to like a 2 or a 3. So I've still got texture in here at sort of like a 2.6, so I'm going to go to a 3. I'm just going to do bounces on this now. Hand on the delete key, hit delete and put in a 4. And that 4 actually looks pretty good. Yeah, I feel like I've lost the real texture in all of this. So I'm going to go ahead and say a 4 on this. So my low layer is going to get a Gaussian blur of 4 pixels. I'll say OK to that. I'm going to click on my high layer and turn it on to make it active. Up to the image menu, down to down to apply image. In the drop-down menu for the layer, pick your low layer and do not invert it. In the blending mode, you change it from multiply down to subtract. You put in a scale of 2 and an offset of 128 and say OK. Now, I'm not going to make my safety layers right now because we're running out of time, but you guys would make your safety layers. I'm going to change the blending mode of that high layer from normal down to linear light. And I should basically have what I'm looking for here. So what I'm seeing here that I'm struggling with are the shifts in tone. I've got some wrinkles that are still down in here that I need to get rid of. So I'm going to hold down my Option key and click on the high layer. And you can see very little of this is in the high layer, but there is a small amount of it in the high layer. When you're working on the high layer, you want to use a hard clone stamp tool. So hit the S key to get the clone stamp tool. Click on the drop-down menu, make sure it's hard. I've got like an 80% hardness on mine, that's fine. Normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow, and only on the current layer. You can also turn on aligned if you're going to do a lot of work down here. I'm going to then hover over this area. I see this one wrinkle that I need to get rid of, and it's texture right here, but it's also going to be in tone. So I'm going to hold down my Option key, click to sample an area of texture right here, and then change the texture on there. And I'm also going to change the texture on there. Those are the 2 lines that are there. I'm also going to do the line that's up at the very top here. I'm going to click and get rid of that texture right here. I overshot that because it brought in texture of what was already there, yet moved down. So Command Z to undo that, and then just set a sample point a little bit further away so that you don't get that, so that doesn't happen. And I'll do one last one up here. So that's the area that we're just going to talk about. I'm going to turn on my low layer right here, and you can see you still see those bumps, and the reason you see the bumps is I've fixed the texture, but I've not fixed the tone. So I'm going to hold down the Option key and click on the eyeball for my low layer, and now I can go in and fix the tone. So in the tone, this is where you want to use Patch Tool or Healing Brush Tool. I'm going to see if we can get this really quickly by just going to the Spot Healing Brush Tool, and then again select the low layer to make sure that you're working on it. I've got an area right here. We'll see if this works. Normal blending mode should be a medium soft brush. It is. That's the default. Content aware is what I'm trying to leverage here, so leave that part on. And then I'm just going to swipe over that part of that line, and it does a pretty good job of killing the texture here. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other one that's underneath it. Pretty good. And then the one that's on the edge. Pretty good. And the one that's up here as well. Pretty good. So then I'm going to turn on anytime. Well, hopefully I can turn on my high layer. And so now you can see if we back out here that this is my split frequency on. Sorry. Turn on the new version. Sorry. Turn on the new version, and not this top part. So this is with it, and that's without it. One last thing I would do really quickly here, just to show you guys some of the mistakes that people are making. I've got a really hard dark line that's running along right in here. That's all in the low layer. Hold down the Option key and click on the low layer. I'm going to go after my mixer brush now. And these are the settings. We've already talked about this. You guys have got the settings to actually use that, to fix that with. I'm going to grab on this lighter layer right here and just start to drag across to my lower layer to get rid of that hard line. So I'm going to bump my flow up a little bit more. And I would really wish my tablet was working right now because this is not working so well here, but you guys get where this is going. You could also hit a regular B for a brush for the B key, drop your flow down to like 1%, hold down your Option key and sample a lighter color right here, and then just paint along this. Oh, that is still too strong. Make sure that that's a soft brush, and then just paint along the area where it's darker. And then this is what our image looks like. If we turn this part on, and you can see we're just softening up that line. And that's it. Questions? The diehards who stayed. That's it. The next, again, the rest of the weeks that everything that we're working on, you guys are just bringing in final stuff. There's more stuff that we will look at here in class, but there won't be any assignments. And I'll see you guys next week. And you and I are going to stay and talk about it a little bit.